Okay, so now we have this, right? But what we want to do is we punch here, we see an increment count, right? Upon doing that, let me run this guy. Now, if I'm here, right, if I've not declared this component as a client component, if I console log, this is where I should be looking at, right, to see what my console should be. But if I've declared here as a client component, by console log, this is where I should be expecting to see my console, right? Now, or my investigation, right? Now, so if I come here, so let's write a function up here. So we say const, let's say add count, and we say let it set count, right? Let's say e plus 1. Of course, this would have to be. So if we save this, and so since a single line code, let's just call this guy. Then inside here, now we can do on click, right? Because it's what again? The client side code, right? So if we save this, of course, this button is not fine, right? We're not focusing on CSS, right? I mean, so let's just do px, let's say 4, then py, let's say 2. Then let's give it a background color of blue, and let's do 500. What else can we do? So let's say text should be white. Of course, we want to do around it to be this. Then let's do empty 5. Okay. Okay, good. So if I punch here, that's what we're expecting, right? Now, let's come here, right? We want to do some investigation. So let's come here and let's say, let me say console log. So let's console log count, right? So if I come down here and I punch, right, I can see my count, right? Okay, so that's good. Of course, we're seeing it twice. You know, by default, use effects is running, right? By default. Now, but here's the problem. So let's say we come here now, and I console log, let's say testing this. Are we good? Should I continue? Now, let's come here. So let's save here. Now, these are two different components, right? Right? And now, forget the fact that I put these two components inside one file. We can still separate them and have them on different file, right? Just for us to be fast. That's the key reason why I put them inside here. But there's a big problem here. And the problem is, if I punch here, we have 1 here, right? But we can still see this component rendering as well. Do you understand me? So this is this component, and this component is this one here, and this is another component, and this component is this one here. So we intentionally put this console log so that we can see the behavior or catch the behavior that is going on here. So if I punch here, I can see that this is the one perhaps I really want operation to happen on. Then why for this one, I just want it to be still, right? Nothing should happen to it. But at the same time, when I punch on this, because here is re-rendering or is rendering in order to print this, which is normal, which is what we want. But at the same time, it is forcing this component as well to render. And that's a problem. And this is synonymous to what I talked about when I said, okay, you're liking a, a post on Facebook, right? Imagine you just like a post on Facebook, and every component that is within the scene or within the screen had to re-render. That's a problem. Abi, do you see it as a problem? So now, how do we solve this problem? That's where use callback or use memo comes to play, right? Now, when do I use callback and when do I use memo? Does anyone wants to try on that? Does anyone wants to tell us something? When should I use callback and when should I use memo? The point, see, even if I say it now, after now, you don't need it again. Do you understand? Why? Why is it that you don't need it again? It's obsolete, exactly. But interviewer must ask you, right? Do you get my point? When you go for an interview, they would ask you, what are the components you would use to optimize performance for React? These are next expo, right? So you just know that the two components, the two hooks you would use to optimize performance is what? Use memo and use callback. Now, for use memo, you're using use memo. We've already talked about optimizing, right? You're using use memo to optimize a component. So you don't want a component to re-render, to rerun. Do you understand the point? Then why for callback? Callback is function based, right? Both of them does the same thing. But one is for components, either component or variable, right? So you do a heavy call or a heavy duty call or an expensive call. So that call, you save that call inside a variable. You use callback, right, to store that variable so that it memorize the result from that call, right? Yeah. Why for use callback? It's a function, so you don't want a function to keep on rendering, keep on running, right? Then you use callback. Does that make sense? For now, looking at what we just did now, which of them do you feel would be best for us to use? Use memo. Why use memo? Not I said. Exactly. Do you get the point? So this is a component here. This is another component, right? So we don't want this component to re-render alongside with this component. So what we can now do, very simple, it's we'll take this guy. So the way to use memo, we have to call it first. So we'll just say use memo, right? So we can now say const we can now say, let's say const I'm bad in naming, so let's just say test, right, is equals to, we call this our use memo, right, and wrap this component inside of it. So it takes in the component, right? So once we do that, of course this guy is shouting because we've not called the type, right? So once we do that, rather than me calling this guy here, right, I can now call that my test. So let's look at it and see why is this guy shouting, expecting 2 arguments for ball 1. So 1 argument can go. So why is it telling me of 2 arguments? Let's see why. Okay, one argument can go. So let me call it here. Yep. Oh, why? So for some reason, this guy is not working. Why? Yeah, test is this component. We can pass a function or we can pass it directly like that. Let's see. We can pass it like that. So for some reason, this guy isn't coming up. Let me see what version I'm using. It's in. I've got it inside the page. Still shouting. There's two arguments. For one. I've saved. Yeah? You see? Let me try it again. Only this thing should work. Let me call it up. Okay, so let's test, right? So use memo, and the callback. They are all for optimization. Now, of course, I've used memo like this before severally, but that's for bits. So maybe for some reason I don't know why I didn't pick up here for next, right? Now, part of the reason why I would have wanted us to use bits, but part of the reason why I want us to use next is because most of the features then, which we'll be doing, next already had those features, right? And personally, I feel that all what React is introducing, I feel they are being inspired from Next. It's my opinion, right? I feel they are being inspired from Next. So it just makes sense for us to just use Next, right? To do that. Okay, so now we're using Memo now, but note that Memo, callback, use callback, Memo, use callback, and use Memo. They are all obsolete. Do you understand me? In fact, from in less than 2 months from now, if you install, you won't be seeing 18 anymore, right? You'll be seeing 19, and we're going to push this guy into 19 because that's what we're going to code with. Exactly. But for now, let's just do small testing. Okay, so now is this clear to everyone? Right? So this is how we just stop re-rendering, whether it's component. So regardless of how your components are, right? So you just push them there, wrap it up with either memo or use memo. It helps you save the work. Right? Do you guys get? It does the work. Okay, so now let's see let's see what when they mention, so we've used this declarative here, right, which is client, right? This is a client file. So what if we want to use this, let's say for server action or something, right? So let me create another file or a folder. So let me just call this components. Components, right? So this is where basically we're going to put all the test work that we'll be working with. So if I come here, let's say action screen. So this is what we want to work on next. So I'm going to call this action screen here, or rather, so I can, okay. So let me say view, and inside here page.txt rmcp. Okay, so here we can say save that, so that we can just come here and route to that place, right? So we go to view. Good. So now we're here. So you can see that I don't have to install a third-party dependency, right? And I can see, in fact, most people when they use React Router DOM, they are basically using it for just routing purpose. They are not using it for state management. They are not using it to fetch data. And there are so many things you can use Router DOM for, right? So why install Router DOM if you're just going to use it for just one thing? It doesn't make sense, right? Because it don't necessarily make your bundle heavier. Do you guys get me? Yeah. I hope it's clear. So now, so we're now here. So we said what we want to put here is action, right? So that's what I want to put here. So the first thing, for us to use action properly, we need maybe an API sort of, right? So I said this is going to be all front end, so we're not doing any back end, right? So for that to work, let's do this. Let's install a fake server, right? So that we can work from that server, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come here and I'm going to say npx json server. So let's call it watch. This guy is going to crash, so let me just install this and install db.json. So inside here, I'm going to say data, and here it's going to hold my information. So two things I want to put here. The first will be ID. So let us let me just put anything, right? So that will play as the ID. Then the second is going to be name, and let's just say Peter. So that's it. So now I can say data slash db.json, give it a port, and let's say 6655. Hit that. So this guy is going to help us to create a server, right? Fake server. Okay, now this is my endpoint. So if I click on it, so this is what we type. So this is what we're going to use to mimic our server. Okay, now that that is cleared out of the way, so here I want to read the server. I want to read that code. Now, remember that when we came here, right? We use state and use memo, right? We used it here, right? But for here, we're not going to use it. So we want this one to be a server-side code. Now, how do we now read content from the server side? Do you guys get the point? So let's try that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say const. Okay, first of all, let's make this async. So let's say const. Let's use rest. We'll use to rest. So say await fetch. Now this is our endpoint. Oops. Okay, so we have this. Now, by default, Next.js automatically creates a catch for us. And I hate the catch. Why? Because it's going to take, depending on randomly, I've not figured out how long it takes to render, right? And that's a big problem because if I update my server, if that time has not elapsed, it's not going to update my database with my code, right? So what I'm going to do is I want to off that behavior. So I'll come to catch and say no catch, right? So don't do the catching for me. I'm going to do my catching myself. Okay, we're going to come here and modify some things, but let's move on. Now, so here, okay. Remember that this is a fetch request. By default, fetch request does not give you a JSON, does not give you a REST API by default. So we need to convert it, right? So let's say const data is equals to await JSON, right? So this now helps us to convert that. Now, before we do anything, let's do console log data. So if we do console log data, remember that this is a server-side code, right? So this is where I'm supposed to see my console log. Very important, so that you don't come here and be expecting to see it here. Good. So now we have this. This is an array. In fact, one rule we use here is, as an engineer or developer, you must know array to your teeth. All the methods in array, you must know them. Exactly. Exactly. So if you know few, go and learn all, not some, all. It's very important. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now, since we've gotten this right, so let's read it up here. So I can just come here and say this, and I'm going to say data dot map, right? And so we can just say this. Okay, so right here, for some reason, I just like using props. Now, even though we know the types that is coming, so we know that it's going to be ID, which is a string, and the name, which is as well a string. So we're not going to, I don't want to prepare the interface, or let's just do that. So let's say interface. So we know ID is a string, and we know name is a string. So definitely this guy is going to be the props of that. Okay, so here we're going to say this should be what? Props dot name. Okay, good. So once we save that, so we see that first name we type here. But as it's a custom for React, this guy will start shouting over time, right? So we have to identify each component that it's rendering, or each div. So we say a key and do that dot ID, right? So this helps in protecting the stuff. Okay, so now we can see this, right? This is clear to everyone, right? Okay, beautiful. Is there anything that is not so clear yet? Everything is clear, right? We've not done anything new. We're still writing pure React code, right? Okay, now Now that we can read it, let's create a form so that we can impute value in, so that we can start seeing the server side stuff action. So if I come still on this view, so let's say form input. So let's say let me do 10. Then let's say the width should be 300 px. I think that's it. Now let's say, so we'd say impute form also. Okay, so right here, so if we save this, so we see this our input form here. So now let's write. So I'm going to say form, right? And this I'm going to call label first, and label I would say name. Then we have inputs. Okay. Then what else should we have? Let's have placeholder. So let's call it name. Name. Then let's do some styling. So let's do so let's do border, let's do rounded empty. Let's do padding x to be 2. Okay. So let's call flex and flex call, right? Now let's so font to be semi-bold and text should be like, let's say 12 px. Okay, so now let's fix this guy. So I'm going to say h to be like, let's say 45 px, and not bad. Then y here I'm going to say m should be like 5, so let it be a bit more. So this is okay, Abi. Then let's style our button. So this should be the, so this is one part of development that I know a lot of developers don't like. Styling, it takes time. Okay, so let's say empty 10, and let's do VG blue and 500. Let's say text white, and let's say padding y to be like 4. Too much. So let's try 3, and of course rounded empty. Okay, so this is okay, right? So what we want here is we type a content, we punch the button, we see the results here. That's what we want. Typically, the way you would write this, just to take away time, we're going to call a state, right? Then we're going to call unchanged state, unchanged rather, right? Then you pass your form events, e.target, all of those stuff, right? Typically, that's how you do it. But if you code like that, you're coding like it's 1947. Okay, so the updates here is this guy. We can now convert this guy. Now, if you want to do that, what I just mentioned, now if you want to do that, this component has to be what? Has to be a client component. Do you understand? If I come here and I do on click, because typically you call on click, right, to submit. If I call this, let me write that function. If I call this and save, this app should crash. Why? This is not a client component. Do you guys understand? This is not a client component, so this app would crash. And we don't want to go through that stress, right? Creating states, pass data to that state, do all of those stuff. We don't want to go through that stress. So React now introduce the server side action. So what we can now do to this is I can come here and say, okay, this file, so let me say, let's call it input action. Okay, then inside of here, I'm going to pass, let me just say form data, and this would have a type of form data. Not bad. Now, here, we need to investigate two things before we move on. How can we capture whatever the user type in here? Very important. Do you guys get? Very important. How can we capture it? So if I type in, let's say pizza, okay, I've used pizza, so let's say pizza. If I type in this and I hit here, how can I see that here, right? So what we'll do is inside of this our input, we're going to pass name, and let me name it name. You can name it anything, it's self-defined. Okay. Now we now come here. We can now say const, let's say name is equals to form data dot get. Then inside there, I'm going to pass this name that I typed in here. Right, this name. So let me say console log name. Now this guy, by default, all forms now has a property called action. So inside that action, I'll pass this guy. So if I save now, sometimes it's good to have error. Okay, so our button, we're going to pass type to be submit and save. So let's come here and let's say use server, and let me see why is this guy crashing. So let's remove this. Yeah. So everything should be fine. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, let's see. So what it's telling me now is that this guy is not, the action is not a function. So let's figure out why is it saying that. Yeah. So let me pass that. Okay, so let's declare this component to be a server component. And still shouting why? Input action. Okay, let me look at it from where it's coming from. This guy is still shouting. Why? So let me refresh here. There are too many errors today. Cannot be passed directly to client's component unless explicitly use server. So it's saying this guy as a client component. Is there any place I pass clients? Let's look at view here. Okay. Yeah, I passed this in. So we're still crashing. Why is it shouting? Okay, let me see. Why is it? Not sure. Okay, so no problem. Let me use clients here. Remove this for this. So my bad, right? Um, this is just what's causing the problem, right? So I was actually putting it up here. I was thinking I'm inside this function. So my bad. Okay, so now that we can see this, right? The most important thing is let's punch, right? And let's capture, right? Let's see whether we can see what's it called, whatever we typed in here. So let's put this. So I punch on that, and let's see, we can see Peter Pan there, right? So that's good. Why? Because at least at the moment, right, we can see that whatever we're typing here, we're capturing it without we using um, use states, all those things, right? Without you using all those stuff, right? Because on a norm, you need at least like 3 or 4 things. You need to do like 3 or 4 things in order to capture user input on a norm, right? Is it making sense? Okay, so now, how do we now capture this thing and send this thing to our database? That's the most important thing, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come here. At least at the moment we can see that we have this, right? So we're going to come here now. I'm going to say um let's say await fetch, right? And we're going to call this our endpoint, and that is 6655 slash data, right? Then here, so we'll say method headers, and that will take content types, then application JSON, right? Okay, then lastly, which is very important, the body, and that would be JSON. So JSON does stringify. Oops. JSON does stringify. Now, remember that we want, okay, we need, so if you look at this our guy here, we need ID and the name, right? So those are the two things we need. So right here, I'm going to say ID. So let's just make it the math dot, let's say flow, then math dot random multiplied by date dots now. Oops. So dates dot now. Okay. Now these are our ideas to be string, Abby. So let's convert it to string back. Then um would say name would be this name, right? Of course, we can map it with name, but from ES7, we don't need that anymore, right? So we just do this, okay? Now let's see. So if I come here, I already have Peter Pan here, so I hit here. If I come here, you can see this guy has now entered our database. Okay, so that's brilliant. Now this is the awesome part. The awesome part is, how many of you have struggled with data fetching in real time? In the sense that when data enters your application, you want to get it in real time. So the best solution is Tanstack, right? SWRU, right? SWRU, which one again? Eh? Eh? Okay, yeah, React query, right? Of course, you can as well use Redux, right? RTK, right? I saw your master class on RTK, right? You can as well use that. But not many people know how to use RTK. Not many people know how to use Tanstack and the rest, right? Right? Because there's a lot of setup you need to do, a lot of boilerplate you need to write and the rest. Now again, this guy now has a perfect solution. Now you can see that we're not using any external library for everything we're writing. And for everything we've written so far, on a norm, we would need some Lego, some libraries. Do you understand that? So we're going to come here first off. Here first off. Now, this guy can take in another argument, and that argument is next. Now, this next can take in either tag or path. So what this means is, params. What this means is, so I can say if there is an update on this slash, on this path, revalidate. That means reload, re-enter our server, update. Do you understand the point, right? But I like using tag, right? So that I can specify each endpoint where I need revalidation on. Yeah. Who are those of us? Okay. No. So no, right? That's the answer to that. That means you need to trust on those third parties. It's just like if you're using Fit, can you do app navigation? No. So you understand? So you have to trust on external. But what we're looking at is how do you reduce all those external, right? So that you focus on the essentials. Okay? You focus on the essentials. So now I call this, right? So that's all I need to do here. Now inside is my form, right? I'm going to come out from here, right? And I'm going to call revalidate tag. So there's revalidate path, like I've explained, and there's revalidate tag. But remember that it was tag we used, right? So I'm going to hit on that. It's a function that takes in an argument. Now, what did we pass here? Name, right? So that's what we're going to pass here. Name. Now, if you're doing this, make sure that I wanted to say something before, but I forgot. Let's continue. Okay, so now we have this. So let me just do one and hit on that. You can see that we're getting our stops in real time. So they hit it, and just one line of code, we get it. Now, there's one hook. If there's still time, I want us to look at that, which is super amazing, right? Optimistic. If you have, sorry, if you're on Facebook, off your data, click on like, see what happens. As you're clicking on like, it automatically counts before updating. Do you understand? Now, part of the key reason why we might not be looking at that today, it's because I don't want us to use an external API. Do you understand? So if we're using an external API, there will be a lag. Even though we're seeing this thing almost happening in real time, so we're seeing that result almost happening in real time. If we're using an external API, there are factors that might not give us that real time hit, like network, system, their own server response time, so many things, right? So what use optimistic does it's assuming that what you're clicking on is you want to like this post. So it's immediately, if you have Facebook, you can test it out because they've experimented on that, and that's the new way of coding. Like it's the updated, right? Hope you get that message. Okay, so now, how do we now? How do we do um, mutation? How do we do mutation? I can stop here like this on this one and move on, but it would make perfect sense that you see how to do mutation, as in it will make perfect sense. But before we do that mutation, if you'd observe, we're still seeing this guy here, right? So if we're using the usual way, so once there is a change, right? Once we update, we'll say clear the state, right? But at this moment, we can't clear the state, right? So how do we now do that? So we need to trust on something. We need to trust on useref. That reminds me, useref is now old school, right? Useref is now old school. But then we need to trust on, sorry, not use forward ref. So the way we pass props with ref, right? So now you can just use the ref and you get the value straight up. Okay, so what we're going to do is I need to use, now pay attention here because here can be confusing. I need to use the use ref here. Now see, if I come here and I say const ref to be equals to use ref, and let's just start with one. If I save, I'm expecting this guy to crash. Yes, it does. Why? Because this is what is server component, right? Right? It's a server component. Now, to fix that, I have to convert this guy to client component. But if I convert it to client component, I face another issue. Do you understand? I face another issue. So how then can I solve this problem? Because I need, when I update, that guy should go off. So what I'm going to do is I can take this guy, the whole of this code, or rather I can even still do it here. So let me come here and let's say ref to be equals to that ref, and just here I can say ref dot current. So use ref only have one method, right? Only one, which is current. Then I can say this should be reset. So this guy will shout as usual, so let's not waste time. So let's say that. Now we've fixed all of this guy, but remember that this is what this is server code, right? And what we're getting here was seeing, it's almost like confusion. Now this confusion on the updated React, this is no more a problem. So you can call server and client inside one component, and everything will be fine. Do you understand? I mean, is that not amazing? Super amazing, right? So now, to fix this guy, what I need to do is I need to take this guy off, or I need to take the whole of this code, this guy, and put it inside another component, right? So that everything will be fine. Or I just off this guy. So whichever way, either you off that guy or you take the whole of this guy and put it inside another code, another component, and everything will be fine. Does that make sense? So now, if I come here now and I say I put this and I hit this, so I'm not seeing a response. So let's look at why. So first thing first to investigate is, let us console log name, right? And I hit here. So it's obvious that this guy is not being clicked. So, and that must definitely be coming from our ref. So let's look at where did we put the ref inside the form, which is good. Inside the form, which is good. And so everything to me seems fine. I save, let me refresh here, and let's come to James and let's hit. Okay, so it's seeing an issue from here. Okay, so this should be down, right? So now let's say I hit this. Oops, I'm still getting my name issue. So let's see why. Okay, let me call this guy back in here. So it crashes. What is it? It's not on yet. Yes. Okay, so now let's look at so because of time, right, let's fire down. So I want to, okay, let's see how do we now use React, the main thing, right? How do we now use it? Because one issue that most of you are going to have, oh, get, okay, so now, please everybody watch it. So if you want to use React now, which is the updated version, all you need to do is to do npm I React at beta, because that's what it is now. It used to be an experiment that's grown to alpha, right? And now it's on beta now. So after now, you know this stuff. So because we're using TypeScript, so I need to do at React. Then the next is React DOM, very important. Okay, so once we do that, right, we're going to have access to some stuffs, right? Now, let's see. So this is types. Now, so by default, we're now going to have access to the new hooks that they're introducing and have access to them. Because of time, right? So we won't look at um, some few that I really I really wanted us to look at. Why is this guy crashing? So we have a bit, okay. Still crashing. Yeah, okay, so let me just remove. So let me first of all install. Well, that okay. And then say for the last time this guy refused to install. We're going to so I don't know why this guy is not installing. So let's continue. Now let me so let's say um and let's say page. Okay, so as usual, let's code. Let's say const. Let's say state set state to be equals to use state, right? So inside here would have our array. See? Okay. So let's okay. So we have this, right? Then typically would want to say, so for example, if I come back to this place here, so you remember this function, right? It will make a whole lot of sense. In fact, let me just copy it. And if I come here and I say, um, typically what I would want to do is to create, let's say like an action file, right? That will hold those functions. So I could say const, let me first of all paste this guy. Okay. So let's say const get data, and that would be an async. Then paste this guy inside here. So let's look at it. Then return res dot JSON. So let's say await. Okay, so we have these, right? So let me export this guy. So if I come here, I would say use effect. Abina, then call this guy here. Okay. So let us say, so for me calling this, I have to declare this guy to be a client. Now let's say this would be a dot thing, and let's say rest to be equals to. So let's say console log rest. So if we save that, let's see what the result would be. So this is a client file. So we get all of these here, right? So I can now pass these arrests inside these are state, right? So we do this and we do this. Okay. So now we can come here and say um, state, right? Dot map. So as usual, I'll say probes dot name. But let me just use any for now. So once we save that, um, we get all of these. Okay, so now that's good. Now you can see the process we have to go through, right? Just to read this file. But since we now have React 18, right? So what I can do is, so let me just say const, um, let me say new state, and I call so I can have my use right inside. Then this guy needs and this guy needs. Okay, so we call this our use. This thing is shaking. So we call this our use, right? And so let's save. So once I save, I'm seeing that it does not understand this my use. Okay, so let's see how we can fix that. So let me make sure that my DOM is installed. This thing should install the DOM. Let me look at the DOM. Yeah, I need it for the DOM. Okay. Yeah, so the DOM has installed. It's just installed now. So I have for okay. Okay, so let's um so let me remove all of this, right? Because we don't need it anymore now, right? So I remove that. Then remember that this is what a client file, right? This should still be a client file. So let's um, call this guy now. So we'll still see those crash or whatever is happening there. It's normal for it to happen. But for this to work effectively, remember when we did that our get data, right? It's going to be getting data from the internet, right? And it's an async. One of the key things for async is what it promised, right? Telling us that this data would come or sometime in the future, right? That's when that data would come. But the problem with that is, sometime in that future, anything can go wrong. What if something goes wrong? What should this code fall back to? Do you understand? So now that's a challenge. So what we're going to do for this thing to work, okay. What we're going to do for this thing to work perfectly is we're going to, now look at this, our use. The file that is wrapping the use has to be wrapped in a suspense. Again, for React 19, there is no need for lazy. How many of you have used lazy before? Good. So there's no need for lazy anymore, which is super cool. Error boundary will be well handled. Makes sense, right? As well as suspense. So what I'm going to do is, you see this file here, I'm going to cut it, come here and say, it's just off now. No. Am I too fast? What's the problem? Okay, so what I'm just doing is I am moving this file, right, from here right into here. So I import that use and I import this guy. Then why this body passes here. So pass that body there. So that can enable me erase here, and I can erase here. So just save. Okay, so save that, right? So now what I can now do with this is I can now wrap this guy in suspense. Now suspense will have a fallback, and that fallback can be another component. But for now, let's just do right. So we save that. So what this would now do, it helps in protecting our code, right? Now the cool thing with this is it is super fast. If I push data to my back end, right? Remember what we did with our server action, right? At least we're getting that data fast, right? But the cool thing with this is that you even get it 2 times faster. Number one. Number two, if I refresh, now look at this. If I refresh this, do you see any lag? No lag, right? Let me come here, right? If I should refresh here, okay, this one try as well. So I'm not seeing a lag here. But if I had called here, let me call here, let me off here. I just want you guys to see then let me call here. Okay, so the same thing. So you can see this lag. Yeah. Right. Now, to some persons, it's okay, it's fast, no problem. Do you understand? But that can cost you your job. Yeah, it can cost you your job, right? So, and that's where our use make acute sense, right? Makes perfect sense. So once we use, if I let me remove here back and call back here, right? So this is where we're reading data from now, right? So if we refresh, no glitch, right? No glitch. If I refresh, it's still there. Now the first time you can see like a flicker, right? You see that flicker, right? That's because it's trying to get the data. So it gets the data, store it in its cache. I told you that the use now has a cache, right? So inside of that cache, it has stored this information. And another cool thing is, if I shoot data to my back end, I get the data like immediately as well. So 2 times faster than what we used to get. At least when we push data, it was fast, right? But this is like 2 times faster. Imagine how it will be. So it's almost like we're not even clicking. And that is the same thing the use optimistic is doing, right? Once you click, it's almost like you just take the data you wrote here and drop it here. Meanwhile, it's going to load in your server. But that time it's loading on your server or it's loading to your server, it will help you place it on the UI so that the client does not even know that there's a lag or something, which is super promising and super interesting. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Ah, okay. One more thing that I would want us to look at is,
What is the mutation?
you say,
Mutation.
mutation, limitation.
Mutate.
Okay, we'll go back to that mutate, right? Because you can see that this guy is getting much. And for that mutate, we'll do that mutate on this screen here. So this is the screen we're using to shoot in data. This guy, we're having too many rubbish here, right? So we need to delete it, right? Now, when we talk about mutate, we're talking about delete, update, right, and to add. So we've done one of which is to add, right? But we need to do delete, right? Update and delete are almost the same thing. So if you know how to update, if you know how to delete, you can still use that same knowledge for updating, right? Okay, so let me just let's come back here. Now, this is not a good way of writing code, but we're going to leave it like this. So what you're supposed to do is to take all these files, right, put them inside an action file, right, so that you can be, let's just do only this one. So at the moment, we're lacking, data is lacking, right? So we'll take it and, so let me say here, I create a file called action.ts, right? And I paste it here, sorry. I say, export, const, all of those things, sharp, right? Let's say save data. Anyways, all of those things, right? So that's what I do here. Put the data and pass it here, right? I don't want to waste time with that. Now let's focus on deleting the data. So if I come to, I think here, I can duplicate this data. Let's say, now don't do this at home, which is duplicate or copy. Type it manually. So I can copy, Control Z. I can copy this and let me come here and let's say um, um, let's say delete data. So I paste this thing here. So for here, I'm going to say delete. Oops. In fact, let me remove here. So here I'm going to say export, right? So this is delete, so we get almost the same thing. But here I'm going to say maybe ID. Here I'm going to say ID, right? So let's remove this. So let's say, so this will be slash, we pass that ID, right? Then this is going to be delete. We don't need, we don't need here, right? So we save. So this is our function for deleting, right? You say? Yeah, it doesn't matter. We still need to revalidate. Jesus. Now, I can now copy this. Now, how do we now use it? Um, this is where a problem now comes in, because for me to delete an item, let's say precisely I want to delete this one, I need to capture its ID, right? So how do I capture that ID? So what I'm going to do is, rather than so I'm going to cut this guy and just say, let's say p tag, paste this guy here, then come here to um do form. So inside that form, I'm going to pass in button. Now it doesn't really matter. In fact, this form and button is very important. I wanted to say it doesn't really matter, but it does matter. So I'm going to say delete, right? So here, let's say style. Um, let the text be 12px. This will be the last thing I'll do, so that the guy for React Native will come up now and just do one or two conversations. Um, so let's say text should be red. How many of you have used React Native before? How many of us know about React Native? How many of us would like to build a mobile app today? Okay, so this is what it's going to, this is what's going to delete, right? So now what I'm going to do now is, I can say, I can call action here and call that my delete action. Do you get? Call that my delete action here. Now, what I need to do is, remember that I need the ID. That's the most important thing. The ID of this guy, the ID of this guy, so that if I'm deleting, it knows what it should delete. So let's first of all see, how do we get the ID? So what we're going to do is, I'm going to say input here. And in this input, it will have a type of hidden, so that it's not visible. Then it will have a name of whatever I named it to be, and I named it to be ID. Of course, this is the most important, which is value. So this value is going to be props.id. So we save this. So let me come to, so let's see why. We're going to fix that. Now, this guy is shouting. Why? Because remember that, so let's come here and let me make sure that this is a server file. So we save. Now, what I need is I want to be sure that I am getting an ID. Exactly. So let's come here. Let me hit here. So you can see that I can see this ID. And if I click here, you can see I'm seeing another ID. So that's beautiful. So now if we refresh, yeah, it doesn't matter. So this is where it's getting at. So Okay, so now we're confident that now, of course, this might not work. Reason being that um, this endpoint does not exist at the moment. The only endpoint we have that exists is slash data, right? But should in case you're working with your own server, then the endpoint must exist, right? And that's how you work around that.
Okay, so that must be the reason why it improves that.
Yeah, that's why it's still saying post, right? Okay. Now, just to take home, so that maybe at home you want to study, right? The best resource to React Native, sorry, React, right? So that's the best resource. But there are like four more APIs I would really want us to look at. Endpoints. But
Business server
Okay,
oh, my screen is not. Yeah.
FPS.
that dashboard is
What points? Yeah. Is it here?
yes, sir.
Okay.
No, as in on your terminal.
Okay.
Do that. Start the command that run that server.
It's
Like dash W.
okay. Anyway, Sha, NPX, I know. Yeah, so this is it here. So npx space JSON dash server dash W, then the path to your data, the path to your database, right? See? Okay, so now let me just explain two things, right? Which React promises. That is the use form states. Use form states and use form status. And of course we have the use optimistic, right? So we have the use form states, use form status, use form optimistic, right? Now what they do? The use form states, it works like the use states. But what it does is it has extra property, which is it has data. Now data is our data. Then it has is spending. Now this is spending is the most important stuff inside this our use function. Now what it basically does is, remember that when you click a button, how many of you have experienced this? You wrote a code, right? You click a button, the button will be idle, and clients or users might be tempted to re-click that button, like sign in. So they click sign in again because nothing is happening. So what we typically do is we put a state to toggle, right? So once you click on the state, once you click on submit, you automatically click on that function. Inside that function there is loading, the way we normally use it, right? It's loading, you turn it to true. They now say if true, there should be a spinner here and showing loading, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Then once it's false, that means the form has been submitted. Once it's false, the spinner should change to false, right? Or that is loading, change to false. Then you see this normally, right? Now, think about the process. You create a state and the rest, right? But with React 19, you automatically get this. right, is pending, you automatically gets it, right, inside this button automatically. So all you just need to do is record that is pending, right? And so if it's pending is true, show that spinner. If it's pending is false. So you're not really using state again. You're not. Do you understand the point? Good. Then another thing is that it has is this form status. Form status and state is the same thing. The only difference is, in fact, there's no difference. The difference is just that rather than it's pending, its own is just pending. So you can use either of the two. Either you're using status or you're using state, right? Good. So that's it. Now, the one that is kind of like tricky that you need to wrap your head well to get is this optimistic, right? And the optimistic, like I said again, works like tuple, right? You know tuple, right? You know tuple, right? So something like, so let's say const. So I could say up, right, and set up, which will be equals to the use optimistic, something like that. Now, it's going to take two properties. Now, to use this, remember that if I'm using any use, it's definitely a client component, right? Right? It's definitely a client component. Now, to use this, it then means that you already have a state that captures data from wherever your data of truth is. Maybe your backend or something. You already have a state that captures it. So, and of course, it might be like maybe an array or something. Do you get the point? You pass it here. Right? Now, when we do our map, this is the guy who now map. Now, this guy would now be a pure function. Right? We now write a pure function inside here. Do you get the point? Now, this pure function is the guy responsible for the mutation of whatever will be happening here. Right? Right? I guess it's there. So, it's super simple. Like, trust me, React 19 makes writing React code 100 times easier. Right, 100 times easier. You'd see a lot of persons coming into React now because when they were using class based, it was crazy, like super crazy. How many of you have seen class components? How was it? Eh? Yeah, super crazy. There were less engineers coming on board. But when they move to functionals, more engineers coming. React 19 will see much more engineers coming. Is that okay? So at this moment, I'm going to create a pause here while we have Mr. Joe come up to just discuss one or two with you guys. Then after his section, I'm now going to come up and we're going to build our first mobile application, possibly, and our first desktop application using React.